After 1 year, 4 time zones, and more nights than I could count convincing myself I was fine, I came home expecting the hardest part to be over. I was wrong before I even got out of the car. The first thing I noticed when my Uber turned onto Elm Street was that the porch light at my parents' house was on. The second thing I noticed was Lion standing in the front yard in a worn, stretched-out sweatshirt and slippers holding a casserole dish like she lived there, which from what my mom had been telling me in her weekly voice memos she practically did. The third thing I noticed was the way her face changed the exact moment she saw Leia step out of the car behind me. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to realize I had a lot of explaining to do, and that I had been a coward for a lot longer than 1 year. The Uber pulled up to the curb, and I grabbed my bag before the driver even stopped completely. A year away does something to a person. You forget how familiar feels until it hits you all at once, the crack in the driveway, the oak tree leaning slightly left in the front yard, the screen door my dad had been meaning to fix since 2017. I took all of it in within 3 seconds. Then I noticed Leanne and the rest of the street disappeared. She was standing in the front yard in a worn, stretched-out sweatshirt and slippers holding a casserole dish, looking at me the way you look at someone when you are trying very hard to appear normal and failing at it completely. I knew that look. I had spent 4 years at university learning the difference between Leanne's real face and the one she assembled for everyone else. Right now, she was running the second one at full capacity. "You're early," she said. "Flight was on time for once." I dropped my bag on the driveway. "You're making my mom's casserole." "I'm returning your mom's casserole dish. There's a difference." "It's full." "Details." I almost laughed. A whole year, and the first thing she did was argue with me about a casserole dish. Something about that felt like oxygen. Then the other car door closed behind me. Leia stepped out, adjusting her jacket, scanning the house with that calm, measured look she brought to everything. We had been on the same research cohort at University College London for 12 months. Same lab, same seminars, same flight home 2 days ago. We had also dated for 5 of those months and broken up 4 months before the program ended, a fact that I considered resolved, and she apparently did not. When I told her I was taking an Uber from Richmond to Charlottesville, she asked if she could ride along and say hello to my family before her parents picked her up. I said sure because I did not think it was complicated. I was starting to realize I had been wrong about that. Because in the half-second between Leia appearing beside me and straightening her collar, Lion's face changed. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would have caught. Her eyes moved to Leia, then to me, then settled on a patch of grass between us that was apparently the safest thing in the yard to look at. 1 second, maybe less. Then it was gone, and Lion was smiling again, easy and warm, the same smile she had given me since the first week of freshman year when I sat in her assigned seat in research methods, and she told me I could stay if I shared my notes. I had been looking at that smile for 5 years. This was the first time it made my chest hurt. The front door slammed open. My mom came down the porch steps at a speed that should not have been physically available to a woman her age, and suddenly I had an armful of her, and the casserole dish was somehow on the porch railing, and my dad was standing at the top of the steps, hands in his pockets, smiling the way he did when he was feeling more than he planned to show. "You look thin," my mom said, pulling back to inspect me. "I look exactly the same. Thin, tired, and that hair needs fixing." "Missed you too, Mom." My dad shook my hand, then pulled me in for exactly 1.5 seconds, firm fast, like he was afraid the hug might become emotional if he let it last any longer. "Good to have you back, son." My mom turned to Leia with the social precision she brought to every church, potluck, and surprise visitor since the dawn of civilization. Leia handled it perfectly. Handshake with my dad, compliment about the garden, right words at the right moments. My mom touched her arm twice in 90 seconds, which in her language was full security clearance. Sophie appeared in the doorway. 17. Absolutely incapable of entering any situation without an opinion. She looked at Leia, then at Lion, then at me with the expression of someone settling into a movie she had been waiting a very long time to see. "Cool," she said in a tone that communicated the exact opposite. "Sophie," my mom warned. "What I said cool." She had not just said cool. 20 minutes of re-entry chaos followed. Bags migrated inside. Dinner was debated. My dad asked about the research, and I gave him the version that did not require 3 academic frameworks. Leia joined the living room conversation with practiced ease. Leanne stayed in the kitchen. I noticed because I always noticed where Leanne was. That was not new. What was new was the tight, unnamed feeling sitting right behind my ribs. I found myself standing in the hallway between 2 rooms, garlic and butter drifting from one side, polite laughter from the other. Through the kitchen door, I could see Lion at the counter, dish towel over her shoulder, moving through my mother's kitchen with the kind of ease that only comes from a year of showing up every single day. 1 year. She had been here while I was across an ocean. And in all those emails, Sophie's applications, the neighbor's dog books recommended purely to irritate me, she never once mentioned my dad, never once mentioned herself. She looked up, caught me watching. Neither of us moved for half a second. Then she raised the dish towel like a question mark. I shook my head. She turned back to the stove, and I stood there knowing I had missed something important. Not just this past year. Much longer. An hour later, Lion said she had an early morning. Goodbye to my parents warm. Goodbye to Leia polite. Goodbye to me quick light like it cost her nothing. She walked down the driveway without looking back. I watched from the porch anyway. Sophie appeared at my elbow, silent, deliberate, perfectly timed. She has been here almost every day for a year, Sophie said, eyes on the street. Tonight she lasted less than an hour. I said nothing. Just thought you should know. She went back inside. The porch light hummed above me. I stood alone in the warm dark, thinking about 12 months and 57 minutes and one expression that lasted less than a second, but told me more than a year of emails ever did. After everyone went to bed, I sat in my old room and tried to remember how to exist in it. The walls were the same, that grayish blue my mom had let me pick when I was 15, and immediately regretted. The desk still had a water stain shaped vaguely like Texas. My bookshelf still leaned slightly to the right because I had assembled it wrong in high school and been too stubborn to fix it since. But someone had put fresh flowers on the nightstand. Small white ones, the kind that grew wild along the back fence. My mom did not do wildflowers. She was a grocery store bouquet person, methodical and predictable. These were messy, gathered by hand, placed in a jar with no attempt at arrangement. I knew who put them there before I finished the thought. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at them, and without warning I was somewhere else entirely. The night before I left for London. This same room 1 year ago. Leanne sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by my half-packed suitcase and a pile of clothes I had not sorted, holding up a wrinkled button-down and saying, "If you wear this in London, they will deport you on aesthetic grounds." I had laughed. She had folded it anyway and put it in the suitcase because that was what Lion did. She made fun of you and then quietly fixed the thing she was making fun of. I remembered watching her fold my shirts with a focus that seemed unnecessary for the task and thinking something I did not let myself finish thinking. "You'll forget how to talk like an American," she had said without looking up. "You'll come back saying things like brilliant and straight away, and I will never let you hear the end of it. I'll be back before you notice I'm gone." She had paused then, just for a breath. Then she smiled and said, "We'll see." 1 year later, sitting on the same bed, I understood that pause for the first time. The flowers smelled faintly of grass and rain. I left them where they were. Downstairs, the house had gone quiet except for the television murmuring in the den. Leia was in the guest room with the door closed. Sophie's light was off. My mom had gone up an hour ago after reminding me 3 times where the clean towels were, as if I had somehow forgotten the location of towels during my time abroad. I found my dad in his armchair watching the local news with the volume low enough that he was clearly not watching it at all. He looked up when I came in and gestured to the couch without saying anything. That was how conversations with my dad worked. He opened the door and waited for you to walk through it. I sat down. For a minute, we just existed in the same room the way we used to when I was in high school and could not sleep. He never asked what was wrong on those nights. He just let me sit there until I figured it out. "You look better than I expected," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You expected worse." "Mom said you had a rough spring. She was vague about it." He muted the television. The room went very still. "Your mother was vague because I told her to be." Something cold moved through my stomach. "Dad." He leaned back in the chair, choosing his words with the deliberate care of a man who had spent his whole life building things that needed to be level and true. I had a cardiac episode in March. Spent 4 nights at UVA Medical. They put in a stent. I am fine now, and I was fine then mostly, but it was not a good week for your mother. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. March. That was 9 months ago. 9 months of emails, phone calls, voice memos from my mom talking about the garden and the weather and Sophie's prom dress, and not one word about my dad lying in a hospital bed with his chest cracked open. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were doing something important, and because your mother and I agreed you did not need to be on a plane in a panic when there was nothing you could do from here that was not already being done. That was not your decision to make. No, he said. It probably wasn't. Silence. The muted television flickered blue light across the ceiling. I pressed my palms against my knees and tried to breathe around the rock that had settled in my throat. Who was here? I asked. When it happened. My dad looked at me for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, Leanne was the one who drove your mother to the emergency room. The room tilted. She stayed 3 nights, he continued. Slept in that vinyl chair by the window, the one that does not recline no matter what the nurses say. Brought your mother breakfast every morning from that bakery on Main Street. Handled the insurance calls because your mother was too scared to focus on paperwork. Made Sophie go to school on Monday when Sophie wanted to skip. I stared at him. She never mentioned any of this. I know. Not once, not in a single email. My dad nodded slowly. I asked her about that. Once near the end. She said she did not want to be the reason you came home early. The sentence landed in my chest and stayed there. She said you sounded alive in your messages, he added. She used that word, alive. Said she was not going to be the person who turned that off. I sat with that for a long time. My dad watched me the way he watched foundations being poured, patient, knowing that rushing this part ruined everything that came after. She should have told me, I said. Probably. He picked up the remote. But she didn't, and you should think about why. He unmuted the television. The conversation was over in the way only my father could end things. Not with a door closing, but with a window opening so quietly you almost missed it. I went back upstairs, sat on my bed, picked up my phone to text Lion to say something, anything, because every email she had sent me in the past year suddenly read like a different document entirely. Then Sophie knocked on my door. She did not wait for me to answer before pushing it open. She was holding her phone out toward me screen first, and her face had the particular expression of a 17-year-old who was about to ruin someone's night on purpose. You need to see this, she said. Sophie did not sit down. She stood in the doorway holding her phone the way someone holds evidence screen out, arm extended, face unreadable. Liane sent me these tonight, she said, after she left. I took the phone. The screen showed a thread between Sophie and Leanne. Leanne had forwarded 4 screenshots, 4 messages from a number saved simply as Laya. They were sent 3 days ago, before I had even boarded the plane. I read the first one. Hey, you must be Leanne. Max talks about you a lot like a lot. It's actually kind of cute how oblivious he is. Just wanted to introduce myself since we'll be staying at his parents' place for a few days. Didn't want it to be weird for you. My thumb stopped on the word we. That single word turned a casual ride-along into something else entirely, as if she and I were arriving as a unit. As if I had not told her 3 times she was welcome for dinner, not to set up camp in my childhood home. The second message was shorter. He's different here than he is at home, you know. London changed him, I think you'll notice. I could hear Laya's voice in that the particular tone she used when she was being warm and cutting at the same time. I had heard it across seminar tables and in arguments in her apartment kitchen. I had mistaken it for confidence once. Now I recognized it for what it actually was. The third arrived after no reply from Leanne. I'm not trying to be mean. I just think it's better if everyone knows where things stand. We've been really close these past few months. Really close. The fourth was the shortest and the worst. He hasn't mentioned you much, by the way. Just thought that was worth knowing. I set the phone on the nightstand. The screen went dark. I sat in the quiet of my old room and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. Not anger yet, but the thing that comes right before it when you are still catching up to what just happened. She had lied. Not about everything. We had been close in the way two people sharing a lab in a foreign city are inevitably close. We had dated for 5 months. We had ended it. But Laya took the parts that were true and bent them just enough to turn them into weapons, and she aimed every single one at the person least equipped to fight back. Lion had read these 3 days ago, and tonight she had stood in my yard holding a casserole dish and smiling like nothing was wrong. She stayed 57 minutes, said goodbye like it cost her nothing, and walked away without looking back. I thought about a rainy afternoon 6 months into London, a cafe near Russell Square. Leia sitting across from me with both hands around a latte looking at me with the expression that always preceded a question I was not going to enjoy. "Is there someone at home?" she had asked. "No," I said. But I was looking out the window when I said it, and she noticed. She always noticed. I think that was the moment she stopped believing me, even though technically I was telling the truth. There was no one at home, not in the way she meant, not in any way I had been brave enough to name. The problem was that Laya saw the thing I refused to look at, and instead of confronting me, she decided to remove it. 4 messages, 3 days, surgical and precise, and aimed at the one person who would absorb every word without fighting back, because Leon had spent her whole life choosing silence over confrontation when the stakes were personal. Sophie was still in the doorway. "When did Leon call you?" I asked. "Tonight, about 20 minutes after she got home." "How did she sound?" "Like she was reading a grocery list, very calm, very steady." Sophie paused. "That is how I know it was bad." I rubbed my face with both hands. The wildflowers on the nightstand suddenly meant something different. Every email Leon had sent me this past year meant something different. The casserole dish, the sweatshirt, the 57 minutes. "Sophie, yeah. Leia and I broke up 4 months ago." My sister stared at me for 3 full seconds. "Does Leanne know that?" The question landed in the center of my chest. I shook my head. "So she thinks tonight, standing in the yard watching Leia get out of your car, she thinks you are still together?" I did not answer because saying it out loud would make it real in a way I was not ready for. Sophie leaned against the doorframe. 17 years old, but looking much older, or maybe I was just looking much younger. She crossed her arms. "There is something else," she said. "Lion has been looking into a position at a research library in D.C. She mentioned it to Mom a few weeks ago. Good opportunity, full benefits, the kind of thing you don't turn down." My stomach dropped. She is leaving. She has not decided, but she started looking about 3 months ago. Sophie took her phone back. "Right around the time she stopped bringing your name up in conversation." She let that hang. "I don't think that is a coincidence, Max." She turned to leave, stopped at the door without looking back. "Her kitchen light is still on. I can see it from my window." Then she was gone. I sat on the bed. My father's words from an hour ago came back. "She did not want to be the reason you came home early." And now 4 messages from a woman I used to date had given Lion every reason to believe she never had the right to want me home at all. I looked at the clock. 11:14. I looked at the wildflowers on my nightstand. I picked up my shoes. I stood on her front walk for a moment, the same few blocks I had crossed more times than I could count over 4 years of college breaks. Leanne had rented a small house near the archive after graduation, close enough to my parents' place that she had become a fixture at Sunday dinners long before any of this started. My hand found her doorbell before I had fully decided to ring it. She opened the door in under 10 seconds, still in the sweatshirt. Reading glasses pushed up into her hair, a paperback held open against her thumb like she had not actually been asleep. She did not look surprised to see me. That told me almost everything. "It's late," she said. "I know. You should be jet-lagged into unconsciousness right now." I was. Then I read some things. Something crossed her face, quick, controlled, gone almost before I caught it. She stepped back from the door but did not invite me in. I stayed on the threshold, the porch light throwing both our shadows long across her welcome mat. "Leia sent you messages," I said. 3 days ago." She did not deny it. She closed the paperback slow and deliberate, the way you close something when you need your hands to do something other than shake. 4 messages, I said. I read all of them tonight. How? She forwarded them to me, said she handled it. Lion let out a breath that was almost a laugh, except nothing about her face was laughing. Of course she did. Why didn't you say anything? She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossing over the sweatshirt. Because I didn't want to be the girl who makes a scene out of your ex-girlfriend being petty 3 days before you're even home. That's not the reason. It's a reason. It's not the real one. I kept my voice level even though everything in me wanted to raise it, not at her, just at the whole situation, the year, the messages, the vinyl chair by my father's hospital bed that nobody told me about. Why, Lien? She looked away from me out toward the street, toward the porch light of my parents' house glowing faintly a few blocks down the road, because if I said something I would have had to explain why it bothered me that much. Her voice had gone quiet. And I was not ready to do that. I am still not entirely ready to do that. I stood there in the dark, feeling something in my chest come loose that had been tightening for a year without my permission. You could have told me about my dad, I said. The subject change did not surprise her. She had probably been waiting for it since I rang the bell. I know. 3 nights in a vinyl chair, Lion. It was not that dramatic. My dad said it was. She was quiet for a moment. I did not want you to fly home in a panic for something that was already handled. There was nothing you could have done from London except worry, and you were doing something important, and I did not think it was my place to interrupt that. It was not your place to decide that for me. No, she said. It wasn't. The admission landed softly between us, no fight left in it, just honesty sitting where an argument used to be. I did not want to be another thing on the list of reasons you had to worry from 4,000 miles away, she added. Your dad in the hospital, your program, the funding renewal you were stressed about in every other email. I made a decision. It was probably the wrong one. I would probably make it again. I almost smiled at that in spite of everything. That was so completely Lion it hurt. She looked at me directly, then something steady coming back into her expression. Why are you actually here, Max? It is 11 o'clock. I thought about lying, telling her I just wanted to talk about the messages about honesty, about all the reasonable things a person says when they are standing on a doorstep at night, working up the nerve to say something else entirely. Because I have been thinking about the year you have not told me about, I said instead. The parts you left out of every email, and I wanted to hear them from you, all of it, not the version you thought I could handle from overseas. Something in her face shifted. She stepped back from the door wider this time, and it was not quite an invitation, but it was not a closed door either. I walked in. Her living room looked the same as it always had. The reading chair with the blanket permanently draped over the arm, the shelf of half-restored books she brought home from work, the mug rings on the coffee table that no coaster had ever successfully prevented. I sat down in the chair I had always sat in, the one across from hers, worn into a shape that fit me from 4 years of Sunday afternoons doing homework in this exact spot. For a second, sitting there, none of the last year had happened at all. You drove me home once, I said before I could stop myself. Sophomore year, 2 a.m. I called you after Marcus and I got into it at that party and you did not ask any questions. You just showed up in your pajamas and drove me home in total silence because you knew I did not want to talk about it yet. She blinked, caught off guard by the memory. I remember. I never told you how much that meant. You didn't have to. She sat down across from me, pulling her knees up onto the cushion, the paperback forgotten on the side table. That's kind of the whole point of us, Max. The word us sat in the room between us undefined and enormous. She reached for her phone on the side table, an old habit more than a real need, and the screen lit up before she could set it face down again. I caught a glimpse of an open app before she could stop it. A photo gallery, dozens of thumbnails, my parents' kitchen, my father in a hospital bed smiling weakly at the camera, Sophie holding up an acceptance letter, a dinner table with an empty chair at the far end. She saw me see it. Neither of us moved for a long moment. She did not take the phone back right away. That was the thing I noticed first, not the photos themselves, but the fact that some part of her wanted me to see them. Her thumb hovered near the screen for a second, then dropped to her lap instead. Go ahead, she said quietly. You already started. I scrolled slower than I meant to. The first photo was my father in a hospital bed, tubes taped to the back of his hand, managing a thin smile for whoever was holding the camera. Underneath it, Lion had typed a small caption, the kind you leave for yourself and forget are visible to anyone else. Told him the doctor said no salt for a month. He asked if bacon counted as a vegetable. Some things never change, and thank God for that. I kept scrolling. My mother in the hospital cafeteria laughing at something outside the frame, exhaustion still visible underneath it. She hasn't slept. Made her eat an actual meal today instead of vending machine crackers. Small victories. Sophie, weeks later, by the date stamp, holding a thick envelope with both hands, her face somewhere between disbelief and joy. She got in. UVA early decision. Screamed loud enough that Mrs. Henderson came over to check if everything was okay. Everything was more than okay. There were dozens more. My mother's garden in early bloom. My father back on his feet, standing a little too close to the grill against doctor's orders. A rainy Tuesday shot of the kitchen table with 4 place settings instead of 5, my empty chair pushed in at the end. Thanksgiving. Set your place out of habit. Left it there the whole meal. Sophie said it was weird. It wasn't weird. It just felt wrong to put it away. I stopped scrolling. I remembered that Thanksgiving from my side of it, sitting alone in my flat in London, a single serving of supermarket roast chicken because none of the restaurants near me were doing anything close to a real dinner video, calling my family for 11 minutes before the connection dropped and did not reconnect. I remembered turning my phone off afterward. Not out of anger. Just because I could not stand to see one more photo of everyone together while I was 4,000 miles away alone, choosing to be there. I had not known there was an empty chair. I had not known anyone thought about the empty chair at all. You documented all of it, I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. I didn't want you to come home and feel like you missed everything. She was watching my face carefully, the way you watch someone you are not sure can handle what you are about to say. I know you were doing something important over there. I know it mattered. But I also knew you would come back eventually, and I didn't want a year to just be gone. Blank. Like it never happened while you weren't here to see it. I set the phone down on the coffee table, face up, my father's photo still glowing on the screen. Why didn't you tell me about my dad? I asked again, and this time it was not an accusation. It was just a question, plain and open, the way you ask something when you actually want the answer instead of already knowing what you think it should be. Lian pulled her knees tighter against her chest. For a moment she looked younger than I had ever seen her, stripped of the composure she usually wore, like a second layer of skin. Because you sounded so alive in your emails, she said. Every single one. You'd write about some argument in a seminar or some pub you found or some professor who terrified you, and I could hear how much you were becoming someone new over there. And I thought, if I call him crying at midnight about his dad, I am going to be the person who reaches across an ocean and turns that light off. I did not want to be that person. You should have let me decide that. I know. Her voice cracked slightly on the second word. I have known that for months. I just could not make myself do it. Every time I opened a new message to you, I would write 2 sentences about the hospital and delete them and write about the neighbor's dog instead. I looked at her, really looked the way I had been avoiding doing since the driveway, and understood for the first time the actual weight of what she had carried alone for a year. Not just my father. All of it. The insurance calls, the vinyl chair, the version of herself she performed for my family every single day so nobody else would have to worry, while nobody thought to ask who was taking care of her. I stood up. She flinched slightly, like she thought I was leaving. I was not leaving. I walked to her kitchen instead, filled a glass with water from the tap the way I had done 100 times in college, and came back and sat down across from her again. Tell me everything, I said. From the beginning. All the parts you left out. She looked at the glass in my hand, then at my face, like she was trying to determine if I meant it. All of it, I said. Take your time. She took a breath, and then slowly she began. I did not stay to hear all of it that night. Lian talked until almost 2 in the morning, and I listened. And somewhere around the story about the insurance adjuster who tried to deny the second round of tests, I realized I had stopped being angry about any of it, and started being something closer to humbled. When she finally ran out of words, we sat in the quiet for a while, not saying anything, and then I walked home in the dark because staying any longer felt like a decision neither of us was ready to name yet. I got maybe 4 hours of sleep. It was enough. When I came downstairs, the kitchen light was already on, though the sun had barely cleared the tree line. My dad sat at the table in his flannel robe, a mug of coffee in front of him, and a plain white envelope resting near his elbow like it had been waiting there for a while. "You're up early," I said. "Old habit from the hospital. They wake you up every 4 hours whether you need it or not." He nudged the envelope and inched toward me without looking up from his coffee. "Sit down for a minute." I sat. He turned the mug slowly between his palms, the way he did when he was deciding how to start something. My dad was not a man who reached for words easily. He built things instead: decks, fences, a treehouse Sophie outgrew years before he was ready to take it down. Words were harder for him, which was exactly why I knew whatever was in that envelope mattered. "I wrote this the third night," he said. "In the hospital. Your mother had gone home to sleep finally, and Lion was in that chair by the window, and I could not sleep myself, so I asked the nurse for a pen and some paper." He pushed the envelope the rest of the way toward me. "Figured a man should say the important things while he still can, even if he never has to use them." My hands felt heavier than they should have as I picked it up. "You don't have to read it now," he said. "I want to." He nodded once and looked back down at his coffee, giving me the kind of privacy that only comes from someone choosing not to watch your face while you read something they wrote for you. I opened the envelope. The letter was 2 pages, his handwriting careful and a little shaky in places, the kind of handwriting that comes from a hand attached to a body that has just been reminded of its own limits. He wrote about the house and what needed fixing and where the important papers were kept. He wrote about Sophie, how proud he was of her, how he hoped I would look out for her the way he had tried to look out for me. He wrote about my mother and what 41 years with her had taught him about the difference between being loved and being chosen every single day, which he said were not always the same thing, though people liked to pretend they were. Then, near the bottom of the second page, there was a paragraph that made me stop breathing for a second. "I watched that girl for 3 nights, son. Watched her handle the doctors, handle your mother, handle Sophie's fear without ever once handling her own out loud. People don't lose sleep in hospital chairs for obligation. They do it because something in them cannot be anywhere else. I don't know what you two have decided between yourselves, if you've decided anything at all, but I know what I saw. And I think you owe it to both of you to stop pretending you don't know it too." I read it twice. When I looked up, my dad was watching me now, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he was working very hard to make it look neutral. "You found the part I meant," he said. It was not a question. "Dad, I'm not asking you to explain yourself to me." He held up a hand before I could say anything else. "I'm 59 years old, and I just spent 4 nights finding out how fast things can change. I don't have the patience left to watch my son dance around something for another year out of pride or fear or whatever it is you call it when a smart man refuses to see the obvious. It's not that simple. It never is." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "But I'll tell you what I do know. That girl slept in a chair that does not recline 3 nights running and never once complained and never once called you because she decided your peace mattered more than her own comfort. That is not something people do for a family friend, Max. That is something people do when they have already decided somewhere down deep that this family is theirs too." I looked down at the letter again, at the line about being loved versus being chosen every day. "I don't know how to do this without messing it up," I admitted. My dad almost smiled. "Nobody does, son. Your mother and I have been messing it up for 41 years. That's not the part that matters." He stood, rinsed his mug in the sink, and set it in the drying rack with the same unhurried care he brought to everything. At the doorway, he paused. "Don't let her get on a plane to D.C. before you say something true," he said. "I mean it. I did not write that letter for you to fold it up and put it in a drawer." Then he went upstairs, leaving me alone at the table with 2 pages of my father's handwriting and a silence that felt different than it had 10 minutes earlier, lighter somehow even though nothing had technically changed yet. I read the last line one more time. "Don't let Lion leave without telling her. I mean it. Dad." I folded the letter carefully along its original creases and slid it back into the envelope. Then I picked up my phone and opened a new message, not to Lian, but to someone else entirely. "We need to talk," I typed to Laya. "Lunch today, and bring your things. You're not staying here tonight. I asked Lion to come too. I did not explain why I only texted lunch. I need you there, trust me. She replied with a single word. Okay, which from Leanne was either total faith or complete resignation, and I was not sure which one I deserved more. She arrived first. I watched her walk in from the parking lot, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, wearing the kind of composure she wore like armor when she did not know what she was walking into. She sat down across from the empty third chair and did not ask what it was for. Leia arrived 4 minutes later. She had dressed carefully, the deliberate kind of careful that looks effortless if you have not spent 5 months learning to notice the difference. She smiled at Lion the way you smile at furniture, then sat down and unfolded her napkin like this was any other lunch. So, Leia said, glancing between us, this feels official. Max mentioned you've been such a help with his family, she said to Lion, her tone warm and precisely calibrated. That's so sweet of you. Like a really good family friend. The words landed exactly where they were aimed. I saw Lion's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, the same controlled stillness I had watched her perform in my parents' driveway 2 nights ago. I did not wait for the appetizers. I set my phone on the table screen up the 4 messages still open from where I had read them the night before. I turned it so both of them could see it clearly. You want to walk me through this? I asked Leia. She looked at the screen. 1 beat. 2. Then she reached for her water glass instead of answering right away, buying herself a second she did not really need. I was just being honest with her, Max. I thought she deserved to know where things stood. Where things stood, I repeated. My voice stayed level, which took more effort than I expected. We broke up 4 months ago, Leia. You know that better than anyone because you're the one who ended it. The only person you were trying to confuse was her. I was protecting. You were scared. I was not raising my voice. I did not need to. You felt me pulling away for the last 2 months in London, and you knew it was not about the program or the funding or any of the things you told yourself it was about. You knew it was about someone back home, and instead of letting that be true, you decided to make sure she never found out it was true too. Leia's composure slipped just for a second into something rawer. Don't ever contact her again, I said, and slid the phone back toward myself. For a moment, nobody spoke. A server approached the table, read the atmosphere correctly, and retreated without a word. Then Leia turned to Lion, and whatever careful warmth she had been performing earlier disappeared entirely. Does she even know how you feel? Leia asked, not looking away from her. Because from where I'm sitting, you've had a year to say something and you didn't. So maybe the problem isn't me, Max. Her eyes cut back to me. Maybe the problem is you're exactly as much of a coward as I am. The table went silent. Lion reached for her bag. I should go. Leanne. 1 word. I did not raise it. I did not need to. She stopped, her hand still on the strap of her bag, and looked at me like she was bracing for something. I stopped looking at Leia entirely. She could sit there or leave, it no longer mattered to me which. I only had eyes for the woman across the table who had spent a year documenting a family that was not technically hers, sleeping in a chair that did not recline, deleting sentences about a hospital because she thought my peace mattered more than her own. She's right that I haven't said anything, I said. That part's on me. I kept telling myself it wasn't the right time, not before I left, not during the program, not now with everything happening with my dad. But I'm done waiting for a version of right that never actually arrives. I thought briefly of a booth at the Mudhouse sophomore year, Leanne asleep on my shoulder during a study session that had gone 4 hours too long, and how I had stayed perfectly still for 40 minutes rather than wake her, telling myself it was just kindness and nothing more. I compared every single person I met over there to you, I continued. Every conversation, every almost good moment. I kept thinking, this isn't her. This isn't Leanne. My voice did not shake, but something behind my ribs did. I don't know exactly what Leia told you 3 days ago, but I know what's true. And what's true is that I have been in love with you for longer than I've been willing to admit even to myself, and I was too much of a coward to do anything about it until my dad wrote me a letter from a hospital bed telling me to stop. Lion did not say anything. Her eyes had gone bright and unsteady in a way she was clearly fighting to control in a public restaurant. Leia stood. She gathered her bag with quiet, controlled movements. No scene, no final speech. At the edge of the table, she paused, just for a second. I really did see it coming, she said mostly to herself. and then she walked out. The restaurant noise came rushing back in silverware. Low conversation, a server calling out an order number. Lion was still looking at me across the table like she was waiting for the rest of it, or maybe like she already had it and did not know what to do with the weight of it yet. "Say something," I said. She did not say anything right away. She reached for her water glass instead, took a slow sip, set it back down with the exaggerated care of someone buying herself time to think. Around us, the restaurant kept moving, a server dropping off a check 2 tables over, someone's laugh rising and falling near the door, and none of it seemed to belong to the same world we were sitting in. "Not here," she said finally. I nodded, dropped enough cash on the table to cover a meal neither of us had eaten, and followed her out into the parking lot. She did not head toward her car. She started walking instead down the sidewalk that ran along the edge of the shopping center and eventually connected to the trail by the river, and I fell into step beside her without either of us saying where we were going. Neither of us spoke for almost 10 minutes. The trail opened up along the Rivanna, the water low and slow with the end of summer sycamore leaves starting to curl gold at their edges, even though it was still technically August. Lion stopped at a bend where the path widened into a small clearing, hugging her arms around herself, even though the day was warm. "You want to know something ridiculous?" she said, staring at the water instead of at me. "Always. 3 months ago, I applied for a position at a research library in D.C. Preservation work full benefits, the kind of job you don't turn down if you're being sensible about your career." She let out a breath that was not quite a laugh. "I told your mom about it like it was just an opportunity, like it wasn't actually about anything else. Sophie mentioned it." "Of course she did." Lion finally looked at me. "I got the offer 2 weeks ago. I have to give them an answer by Friday." The information landed heavier than I expected given everything else that had happened today. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I hadn't decided if I was taking it." She turned back toward the water. "And because some part of me thought if I left before you really came back, before any of this became real, it would hurt less than staying and finding out you didn't feel the same way I did." "Lion, I've been in love with you since sophomore year, Max." She said it fast, like ripping off a bandage, like the only way to get the sentence out was to not give herself time to reconsider it. "Since before Marcus, actually, if I'm being honest, which is deeply embarrassing timeline-wise, and I got very good over the years at making sure you never noticed. I dated other people. I threw myself into the restoration program. I planned an entire alternate life in D.C. specifically so I would have somewhere to go if watching you fall for someone else ever got to be too much." I stopped walking. She stopped a few feet ahead of me, realized I was no longer beside her, and turned around. "Sophomore year," I repeated. "That's before junior year." "That's yes, Max, that is how numbers work." "So you were in love with me first." "Do not," she said, though something in her voice had gone warmer, less guarded. "Turn this into a competition." I laughed, the first real laugh I think I had managed since stepping off the plane, and something in her expression cracked open at the sound of it, softened into an almost smile she seemed to be actively fighting. "I mean it," I said, closing the distance between us. "You cannot just tell me you were quietly building an emergency exit plan out of loving me and expect me to let that go unremarked upon. I regret every word of that sentence already." "Too late," it said. She looked up at me, and for a moment the humor between us gave way to something quieter, more exposed. The late afternoon light came through the sycamores in broken gold pieces catching the edge of her hair, and I thought about a year of emails that never mentioned any of this, a year of photos with careful captions, a woman who had spent 12 months being everything my family needed while apparently planning her own quiet exit in case I never noticed her at all. "I noticed," I said quietly. "I want you to know that. I noticed you a long time ago. I was just too much of a coward to do anything useful with it." "You've mentioned the coward thing already, twice actually in the last hour. It bears repeating." She almost smiled at that, but her eyes were too bright, too close to something neither of us had said out loud yet. I reached for her hand. I did not ask permission first. Some decisions I was learning mattered more when you simply made them. Her fingers were cool from the water glass, and they curled into mine without hesitation, like some part of her had already decided this before I had. "Cancel the flight," I said. "Or the offer, or whatever it is you need to cancel. Don't go to DC. Give me a reason. I think I just gave you about 6 years' worth if we're counting from sophomore year. She was quiet for a long moment, looking down at our joined hands like she was trying to memorize the shape of it. Then, without letting go, she reached into her bag with her free hand, pulled out her phone, and opened her email. "I'm not saying yes to anything yet," she said, though her thumb was already hovering over a message with DC Preservation Role follow-up in the subject line. "I'm saying I'll think about it seriously, which is different and which you are not allowed to treat as a victory." "Understood." "I mean it, Max. I heard you the first time." She typed something short. I could not see the words and did not try to, and hit send before she could change her mind. Then she looked up at me, the river behind her catching the last of the afternoon light, and for the first time since I had stepped out of that Uber the night before, she looked like she was not performing anything at all. "Now what?" she asked. Now what turned out to mean a lot of ordinary things strung together over the following week, none of which felt ordinary at all. We started with the guest room. My mom had been meaning to repaint it since before I left, and somehow I still cannot entirely account for how this became a project Leon and I took on together 3 days after the restaurant, both of us standing in the half-empty room holding paint swatches like the fate of the house depended on it. "This one," Lion said, tapping a card labeled Morning Fog. "It's calming, neutral, sophisticated. It's gray. It's Morning Fog. With better marketing." She swatted my arm with the paint card, and I caught her wrist before she could pull it back, and for a second we just stood there in the middle of the room, sunlight coming through the half-drawn curtains, her hand in mine for the second time that week, neither of us in any particular hurry to let go. We painted the room Morning Fog. It looked exactly like gray with better marketing, and I told her so at least 4 times over the course of the afternoon, and she threatened to write it on my forehead with the leftover paint each time. The days that followed had a rhythm to them I had not expected to find so quickly. Coffee in my parents' kitchen most mornings, the two of us usually the first ones up trading sections of the newspaper neither of us actually read cover to cover. Evenings spent helping Sophie prepare for orientation, Lion advising on which sweatshirts were acceptable, and which were in her words a cry for help, while Sophie rolled her eyes and secretly took every piece of advice. My dad watched all of this from his armchair with the particular satisfaction of a man who had finally gotten what he wanted and was trying very hard not to gloat about it. On the 5th evening, Sophie caught me alone in the kitchen while Leon was in the bathroom. "You know Mom bet Dad $20 you'd figure it out before Labor Day," she said, pouring cereal into a bowl at 9 at night for reasons only a 17-year-old could justify. "Excuse me. They've had a bet going since March. Mom said you'd come around by the end of summer. Dad said you'd need at least until Christmas." She shrugged. "I had money on the letter working. I win the most, by the way. I get $50 from both of them." "You bet on me." "We all bet on you, Max. It was very entertaining." She took her cereal and wandered off toward the den, entirely unbothered by the revelation she had just casually detonated. I did not have time to fully process this before my phone buzzed on the counter. An email notification, subject line bold with the particular formality of institutional correspondence, UCL Fellowship Committee, 2nd year research continuation offer. I read it standing in the kitchen. Lion's laugh drifting faintly from down the hallway where she was still teasing Sophie about something. The offer was real, and it was good, a full 2nd year funded with the kind of research access that had been the entire point of going to London in the first place. 6 months ago, I would have said yes before finishing the email. I did not say yes. I did not say anything. I closed my laptop and did not mention it to anyone that night. The following evening, I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed, my laptop open to the reply I had not yet sent. The cursor blinked in the empty body of the email. I typed 2 sentences, deleted them, typed 3 different sentences, deleted those too. I thought about my dad's letter folded now in the drawer of my desk upstairs, the line about being loved versus being chosen every single day. I thought about a year of captioned photographs documenting a family that was not technically hers. I thought about a woman on a bend of the Rivanna telling me almost apologetically that she had built herself an exit plan just in case I never turned around. I thought about turning around now a year later than I should have and finding her still there. Down the hall, a light clicked on. Footsteps. Lion appeared in the kitchen doorway in an old t-shirt, hair pulled up messily, clearly having heard me typing and deleting and typing again through the thin walls of a house she practically lived in now. "You've been sitting here for 40 minutes, she said. "I can hear the keyboard from my room. Well, from the guest room." "I got an offer," I said. "Second year at UCL, fully funded." She went very still in the doorway. "Oh." I haven't answered yet. "Max, that's an incredible opportunity. That's exactly what you've been working toward." "I know." I looked at her standing there in borrowed light, unguarded in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. "That's the problem. I know exactly what it's worth, and I still don't want it." She crossed the kitchen slowly and sat down across from me, the same seat she had occupied at 100 ordinary breakfasts over the past week. "Don't decide anything because of me," she said quietly. "I mean that. I'm not deciding because of you." I turned the laptop slightly so she could see the blinking cursor. "I'm deciding because of me. You're just the reason I finally noticed what I actually wanted." She did not say anything to that. She reached across the table instead and turned the laptop the rest of the way toward herself, reading the offer in silence while I watched her face for some sign of what she thought I should do. She slid it back to me without a word. I put my hands on the keyboard, typed 2 words, did not delete them this time. I hit send. I woke up before anyone else in the house, which had not happened once in the entire year I lived in London, where mornings meant an alarm I resented and a commute I tolerated. Here my body still ran on some older clock, one that remembered what it felt like to wake up without needing a reason. I made coffee, quietly took my father's letter from the drawer where I had folded it 3 days earlier, and carried both out to the porch before the sun had fully cleared the tree line. The morning was cool in the specific way late August mornings in Virginia sometimes are, a preview of autumn arriving early and leaving before anyone could get used to it. I sat on the top step, unfolded the letter, and read it again, slower this time, without the adrenaline of the day I first received it. "Don't let Lion leave without telling her. I mean it," I had told her. Twice now, if I counted the restaurant and the riverbank and whatever the email last night technically counted as, which I supposed brought the total to 3. My dad would probably say that was 3 more times than most men managed in a lifetime, and he would probably be right. The screen door creaked behind me. I did not have to turn around to know it was her. I had spent enough of the past week memorizing the particular rhythm of her footsteps that I could have picked them out of a crowd. She sat down beside me on the step without being asked, holding a second mug of coffee, which she handed over without comment. I had not asked for it. She had simply known. "You declined it," she said. Not a question. "How do you know that?" "Because you slept like a person who made peace with something instead of a person who's still arguing with himself. You talk in your sleep, by the way. Did you know that you said something about a funding committee at around 3 in the morning through the wall? That's deeply invasive information. I live here now, apparently. Occupational hazard." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "You didn't have to turn it down, Max. That was a real opportunity. I meant what I said last night." "I know you did." I looked out at the yard, at the oak tree leaning slightly left at the street, where a year ago I had climbed into an Uber, convinced the hardest part of anything was already behind me. That's exactly why I knew it was the right call. If you have to talk yourself into giving something up, it wasn't actually yours to keep. And if giving it up feels like relief instead of loss, you already know the answer. She was quiet for a moment, studying the steam rising off her coffee. "I withdrew my application too," she said. "Last night. Before you even sent your email, actually. I want you to know that. I didn't do it because of what you decided. I did it because somewhere on that river yesterday I stopped needing an exit plan." I turned to look at her. She was watching me with an expression I had not seen from her before. Not the careful, composed one she wore for my family, not the guarded one from the driveway 3 nights ago. Just steady, open, entirely unhidden. "A year," she said quietly. "You were gone a whole year, Max." "I know. Don't do that again." "Yes, ma'am." She laughed at that. A real laugh, unguarded, the kind that made the tightness I had carried in my chest since the airport finally loosen all the way. I set my mug down on the step and reached for her hand, and she let me take it without hesitation, her fingers folding into mine like they had been waiting a long time for the invitation. The front door slammed open behind us. Oh my God. Sophie stood in the doorway in pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt phone already raised like she was documenting evidence for a trial. Mom, Dad, get out here. Pay up. Sophie, I started. I won $50 from each of you. She was already retreating back into the house, shouting toward the kitchen. He's holding her hand on the porch. That's the bet. That's literally the exact bet. There was a muffled exchange from inside my mother's voice rising in mock outrage, my father's low laugh underneath it, the unmistakable sound of a drawer opening, presumably in search of cash. Lion looked at me, eyebrows raised, fighting visibly against a smile. Did they actually bet on us? Apparently since March. How long do you think they've been waiting for this exact moment? I looked out at the yard, at the porch light still glowing faintly, even though the sun had risen well past the point of needing it at the street where all of this had started less than a week ago, with a casserole dish and a stretched-out sweatshirt, and a face that changed for less than a second and told me everything I had spent a year too afraid to see. Probably about as long as I have, I said. Lion leaned her head against my shoulder, easy and certain, the way she had probably imagined doing 100 times before either of us said a word about any of it. Inside the house, Sophie was still narrating the transaction at full volume, and my mother was laughing, and my father's voice cut through low and warm underneath all of it, saying something I could not quite make out but did not need to. The porch light hummed above us in the morning light, unnecessary now, still burning anyway. I did not turn it off. Lion lifted her head from my shoulder and looked at me, really looked the way she had on the riverbank, unguarded and steady, like she had run out of reasons to hide anything. For the record, she said, I would have waited longer, if you needed it. I know. I just didn't want to. I know that too. She was still holding her coffee in one hand, my fingers still laced through her other, and for a moment neither of us moved, the porch light humming faintly above us in the growing daylight. Inside the house, Sophie's voice had dropped to a triumphant murmur as she counted her winnings, and somewhere beneath it my mother was laughing at something my father said. None of it felt urgent anymore. That was the strangest part. A year of distance, 3 days of confessions, 1 letter from a hospital bed, and now finally there was nowhere left to rush toward. I reached up and tucked a loose piece of hair behind her ear, the way I had wanted to do 100 times over 4 years of pretending I didn't notice things like that. Can I kiss you? I asked. On the porch, in front of my entire family who are apparently gambling on us in the kitchen. She laughed, soft and real. You're asking permission now, a little late for that sailor? I'm trying to do this right. Doing it right doesn't mean doing it slow. She set her mug down on the step, both hands free now, one coming up to rest against my chest. Kiss me, Max. So I did. It was not dramatic. There was no music, no perfect light beyond the ordinary gold of an August morning. No grand gesture beyond a year of finally choosing to stop waiting. Her hand curled into the front of my shirt, and mine found the curve of her jaw, and when she sighed against my mouth, something in my chest that had been braced for a year finally completely let go. Somewhere behind us, the front door creaked open again. They're kissing, Sophie announced to the entire household with the volume of someone reporting breaking news. Okay, this is officially worth $75. Neither of us pulled away. I used to think coming home meant walking through a door and finding everything exactly the way you left it. I know now that isn't true, and I don't think it's supposed to be. The people who love us don't just wait quietly while we're gone. They carry things for us. They make decisions in the dark so we can sleep a little easier across an ocean, and sometimes they build entire exit plans just in case we never turn around to see them. Home was never a place I was flying back to. It was a person who had been choosing me quietly the whole time I was too afraid to choose her back. If this story found its way into your chest a little, I'd love to hear about it. Has someone ever kept a light on for you longer than you realized? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if stories like this one mean something to you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. There are more where this came from.